Frederick Van Johnson. I'm here in the Aperture Gallery in Campbell, California with Mr. Stephen Oachs. He's the guy that created this and this amazing body of work that we're surrounded by, and that's one of them we're going to talk about right there in a second. But one of the reasons that I wanted to speak with Stephen was, A, he's going to be coming to my meetup group to talk about a whole litany of cool photographic topics, but also specifically I wanted to pick his brain about this kind of photography, and that's where you stitch multiple images together to create something much larger than any individual image, so the sum of its parts. So Stephen, I want to say welcome, but I'm in your house. So.
You are here in the Aperture Academy today.
This is a great place. So let's start with the Aperture, the gallery itself.
Sure.
What's the history of this place? What was the impetus of building this? Why'd you put it together?
Well, it's a good question. I'm a self-taught photographer. I started as a wildlife photographer about 14 years ago. My first photography was my beagle, my dog, so he was my first wildlife.
Yeah.
And it quickly grew from beagles to bears in Africa and so on. And I really struggled in those early years because there was no place to go for me to learn. I could read a lot of books, I could read things on the internet, but you never believe what you read on the internet.
Sure.
And so over the years, of course, I did finally teach myself, and what I realized is that the revolution of digital cameras, how fast it was growing, and I recognized that there wasn't an outlet for people to go and learn easily, and other than going to the Academy of Arts or some big school where you really had to dedicate a lot of money and time.
Yep.
And so I thought, well, people need a place to go where they can take classes a la carte and learn at their pace and at their level, and so that really inspired me to open something like this, and here we are.
And it's amazing. Like, if you're in the Bay Area, definitely come check out the Aperture Gallery. I mean, the work in here is stunning. And this is all your work, right? So it's hard to explain in a little video like this, but you have to come in here and check it out. I feel like there should be wine in here somewhere,
Well, you come in the evening and we do.
There's wine?
Yeah, we
do. Done. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to focus this discussion on is there's so much to talk about. I mean, we could talk for hours just about the gallery itself, but is the whole idea of GigaPixel.
Sure.
And shooting multiple images to create something larger than you would have had with just a single shot, like the shot behind you. What is the shot that we're looking at right now?
This is my latest multiple image stitch. This is actually 36 images stitched together. And so what you're able to achieve is there's a couple of things you achieve here that you could not achieve even with film or even with a very large megapixel camera. There are Hasselblads and there are other models of cameras out there that are achieving 40 to 60 megapixels in size. Well, this is many hundreds of megapixels in size. And so by taking multiple images and stitching them together, you can achieve a resolution far greater than anything you could even do with a large format in film. Large format in film was roughly around 96 to 100 megapixel equivalency, and even that is many times less than what you achieve with this technique. The other advantage to this technique is that you gain the benefit of telephoto compression. And so in telephoto compression, anything that's further away appears closer and vice versa. So you get this very in-your-face feel, this almost like three-dimensional feel from
almost like you're in the scene, kind of.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you were to take this with a regular single frame, the Aperture, which is the mountain you see here, would appear much smaller and much further away. And because this was shot with an 85mm lens and it's multiple frames, you get that telephoto compression benefit.
Wow. Okay, so then how many photos did you say it took to create
this particular one is 36.
36. Processing power to stitch 36 images together in time. How does that work? Photoshop, right?
Yeah, I just use Photoshop. There's a lot of tools for stitching. I've tried them all, and I always come back to Photoshop. It really is, for me, the right tool for the right job. I know some people swear by other tools, and there are lots of great tools out there. I find Photoshop to do what I need. I'm doing pretty basic stitching here. It is multi-row, but I'm not doing anything beyond that fancy.
Yeah.
All the post-process is all done with each frame as a group while they're raw. So once they're stitched, the final step is pretty much just some sharpening and, of course, cropping if it needs to be done for ratio.
Yeah,
keep it simple. The end result, I mean, this is a 10 by 7 foot print. The end result with a file this size could be many times larger.
That's amazing.
The largest one that I've done multi-row is a shot of Bryce Canyon.
Oh, yeah.
And it is a 60 image panoramic. and we could print that the size easily, without exaggeration, the size of a billboard, and still retain the fine art quality that you
So
see.
restrictions in shooting this. So one of the things that pop into my head is landscapes, awesome, but anything moving, you're in trouble. Like if you wanted to do, well, you're the expert. If you wanted to do a gigapixel image of a scene with the Golden Gate Bridge in it, cars always on it, tourists everywhere popping around. Could you do that, or have you done that?
I actually have. I have an image of the Golden Gate Bridge from last year during the supermoon, and it took me 3 nights of shooting it. The moon is in the scene. It's actually a little higher than I ultimately planned it to be, but it is in the scene, and only 1 frame of that shot is the moon. I shot it with a 500 millimeter lens. So a lot of people think the moon has been photoshopped in because they say, how is it that big?
Yeah.
And that goes back to that telephoto compression, is they don't understand that when you look at the moon through a 500 millimeter lens, it fills up almost the entire view. Right. And so if each frame is taken at 500 millimeter, the moon is simply one of those. And that's to the greatest extent that benefit of that telephoto compression. Yeah. To take a photo like that in a single frame, you'd have to be about 2 or 3 miles out in the sky on a platform shooting down on that.
Yeah.
So it's it really is, to me, it's the kind of that bleeding edge of photography. It's what's next, because the equipment is just not there yet. But even if we had a camera today that could take a gigapixel photo, you had a sensor that was 1 gigapixel, you still wouldn't have the benefit from telephoto compression.
Now, the things that are swimming in my head right now are gear involved, because I know a lot of photographers that are watching this are like, okay, I got to go do that right now. I have Photoshop, I have a lens, I want to go create these. But it's a little bit more than that. We were talking about before we started the interview is there's this massive influx of people that are coming into photography and love it, right? And I love that they're coming in, that they're excited about photography. They get the good gear, better than what we had when we started, right?
For sure.
They get that gear, but then they hit a point where professionals sort of take over, where it takes a lot of due diligence, it takes a lot of time and effort. Can you talk about that a little bit, like your process for doing these, and where amateurs might fall down and where a professional kind of continues on with the football?
Yeah, a lot of these images, there's a lot of timing involved in them. Timing and planning. The Golden Gate Bridge shot, for example, that I'm talking about, the Bryce shot. I've been to Bryce a dozen times at least in many different conditions, and to find it finally with snow on it, which is how I shot it, with even light. These multi-roll panos require even light. An image like this took 3 or 4 minutes to pan through and capture all the images. Gear is important, but I'm a firm believer that you can take a $800 entry-level DSLR and take a great photo with it if you know what you're doing. But there is a point in which gear becomes a bigger factor, especially a multi-row panel such as this. Accuracy of each frame as you pan through and take them is key. Not only accuracy with your camera settings, but accuracy in how you measure each frame. I use Really Right Stuff. I don't know if we can talk about that.
Totally.
I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I am a fan of their gear. I think their equipment is very high quality, and I use their multi-row pano kit. It's not cheap. I think the whole kit runs somewhere around $1,200. Okay. But it gives me the leveling ability that I need and the accuracy I need to go through each frame. There's another
like
device.
Click stops, it's like boom.
Yeah,
boom,
it has little
boom.
degree markers
With just enough overlay so Photoshop can have enough to bite onto from each image.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you want about a 20 to 25% overlap, so you have enough pixels for things to grab.
Right.
But the other benefit to this piece of gear is that it allows you to find the nodal point and set the nodal point. And nodal point is a pretty complicated topic, but in essence, you are pivoting on the nodal point in the lens, not on the camera. When you're pivoting on the camera, your images will have what's called parallax. And that parallax is when you stitch those panoramics that you probably played around with, and they look like a U. They get all warped.
And now you got to correct that.
You got to correct
that. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so by using the right gear, you eliminate parallax, and thus your stitches, they still will be off a little bit if you don't get it perfect, but they're much more in line, and you end up with a much better quality result.
It reminds me the nodal point. So there's like you're saying, there's 2 nodal points, right? So there's the one where the light in the lens actually crosses and flips,
Right.
And then there's a nodal point on the sensor. Because if you look on most DSLRs, there's a little circle on the top with a line through it that represents where the plane of the sensor is. So you're saying for these to come out correctly, you want to be using the nodal plane where the lines cross in the lens itself.
That's right, of the optic, yeah.
Cool. That's a good point. We should link all this stuff.
Yeah, you know, I'm actually, and I've been working on this for about 3 months, but I'm working on an article. I travel so much and I'm out shooting so much that it's hard to, I end up writing on the plane a lot, but I'm not getting it done. I just got back from Canada where I did some panoramic shooting. We don't have anything ready yet, but I have a new image from up there that we're getting ready to print. The other thing about the gear, so I use the Really Right Stuff, the manual version. There is a device called a GigaPan.
I was going to ask you about that. A lot of people talk about it. It's like a robot.
It kind of looks like a robot.
Yeah, it's like a little R2-D2 that's like shot, 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 shot.
Yeah, and I've never used one. They offered to send me one time, and I got busy and never got around to it. But basically, you program it, and it'll do all of that for you. I don't know. I'm not old-fashioned or old school in any way, but to me, I really like the manual process. I'm a fan of that.
That's I'm happy to hear that because one of the folks I think that's coming to the meetup that you're going to be teaching is a fan of the GigaPixel or GigaPan hardware. So I want to hear your thoughts in that talk versus manual versus automated.
Sure.
Okay, so then just to sort of close off this topic a little bit, when you're doing these types of shots, say it's this shot right here. I don't know if there were people in there or not. Now, are you finding that you have to do a lot of post-processing to remove the people out? Or even the Golden Gate Bridge shot, with all the movement in there, how do you allow for that?
Well, the Golden Gate shot was pretty easy. The people that are in it are so far away that they're really irrelevant. Okay. The only motion issue I had with the Golden Gate Bridge was the moon, but the good news is it was one single frame. Yeah. And then the cars on the deck. The good news is it was late enough into the blue hour that the exposures were each 11 seconds. So the car taillights and headlights were enough of a streak that the stitching grabbed them and pulled them together seamlessly. Okay. This image is a much different story. There were about 200 people in this photograph, but they were not cloned or photoshopped out. Rather, what I did is the first 2 rows of this image, there were no people at all. So I was able to pan through and take each of the first 2 rows. Yeah. The last 2 rows had lots of people in them. So what I would do is the Really Right Stuff device has little degree markers, and I knew how many degrees each frame needed to be. So I would look through the viewfinder. If there was no one in the frame, I would take the shot. I would move to the next marker and wait for the frame to clear and take the next shot. Cool. The only reason I was able to achieve that is I had a very even, overcast, foggy day. Right. If the light had been more dramatic than it was, then I would have had shadows that would have changed, and it would have inhibited. It would have kept me from stitching properly.
Broken the illusion, yeah.
Right. So the people are not in here because each frame was taken as they left the scene.
Now, have you ever experimented with that technique of using the median control in Photoshop, where you can essentially throw a bunch of images on it and it will create a single image from that stack of images without people in there?
Yes, I have, and in my experience, it will not process files this big. Oh, because this file here was about 8 gigs in total. Yeah. And it's in Photoshop, you have to use the large document format for these, the PSB. Yep. And if you have a couple of PSBs open, at least on the Mac that I use, which is a newer Mac laptop with 8 gigs of RAM, it just seizes up.
Can't handle it?
Yeah,
wow.
Can't handle it.
Well, maybe you need that new MacBook Pro.
That's a sweet
or the MacBook or Mac Pro that's coming out. Yeah, that's insane.
Talk about an R2-D2.
I know, right? Yeah, or a core of some sort.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about output. So these are printed. It looks like they're on metal.
They are.
So take me through that process, because these are giant metal prints that have to be exactly the same from print to print. Who's doing these for you, and why metal, and all that stuff? Yeah,
so good questions. Metal has really taken off in the last couple of years. I remember when we first opened the gallery, and all my years at art and wine festivals and selling online, traditional prints, we did a little bit of canvas, but most was luster and glossy and your traditional matte and frame. The last couple of years, the market has really changed. Metal prints have gotten a lot more affordable. It is a fairly expensive process, all things considered, to print on metal. The technique is actually very scientific. If you're old enough to remember the old iron-on t-shirt process, where the photo was, or the print was backwards, and then the t-shirt, and you ironed it in the heat. Well, it works very much in the same way, except the heat is much more extreme. They actually have this giant press that they use, and the print is actually chemically infused onto the metal. It cannot come off of there. It is baked in.
It's part of the metal now.
It is now infused
molecularly, right?
Exactly.
Wow.
So these are all done by Bay Photo. We have a great relationship with Bay Photo.
Bay Photo. Yep.
Yeah, they print 90% of what you see in the gallery. And we worked with them quite a bit on these big metals. These panels here are 40 by 60 inches, and we did a quad-tick of them to create this image.
Yep.
We're only limited in metal size by the size of the press,
Yep.
and these big presses are upwards of $40,000 to $60,000. Yeah, so hopefully Bay Photo will come up with a bigger press someday, and we'll be able to do these in single sheets, which I'm looking forward to.
Is this, so these quadrants right here, is this the largest that you can go right now?
The largest you can go right now is 94 by 42, so almost a sheet of plywood.
All right, so Stephen, we're looking at Bryce Canyon here, and this is gigantic. Let me step back a little bit just to show how big that is compared to you. You're the reference scale right there. So how big is this? What's the size?
This is a 14 feet wide, 7 foot tall print. This particular print, this is the largest multiple image stitch that I've ever done in fine art quality. This is a composition of 60 images stitched together. This particular image is printed on 4 metal panels, so similar to the Machu Picchu image that we're looking at. And these panels are the biggest panels currently that you can make in production. And so what we did is we split the image across 4 of them to create a quad-tick setup.
Wow. Okay, now the detail that's in this one is just outstanding again. So 500 millimeter lens, zoom lens on this, right?
300 on this one.
300, okay.
300 millimeter lens. Yeah, the funny story behind this, I've been to Bryce Canyon many times. I was actually in Arches National Park the night before this, and I was watching the weather, because as a nature photographer, you tend to look at the weather a lot.
Yeah.
And I saw there was a big storm moving in from the west, and I thought, gosh, if I could get to Bryce Canyon by morning, there could be snow on it. And I drove all night to get here, over a pass in my motorhome. I got there that morning. I waited about 15 minutes. This was taken about 9:30 in the morning. The light was perfectly even, and I was so excited because I had been here many times trying to take this photo. This photo has been on my photo bucket list for a good 6-7 years. So,
Really?
Yeah.
Really. And that's part of what we were talking about, that diligence, the due diligence to keep going out there, and finally walk away with this shot.
Yeah, there's a lot of timing involved in some of these, and then as we all know as photographers, sometimes you get lucky. What's that saying? Even a blind squirrel bumps into a nut once in a while.
Yeah. Or even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yes, there you go. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so you're working on an article in between flights on how to do this.
I am. I hope to have it up sometime. I'm headed to Africa soon. I'm going to be gone for a couple of months. I'm hoping by the end of the year to have the article ready. It's an in-depth article on how I do this. I have some little video tutorial that's part of it, and I showcase a lot of the gear that I use, and I have a lot of photos. I was just in Canada taking pictures of all the gear while I was on location. So hopefully I'll be able to share this knowledge with you all very soon.
Very cool. All right, where should people go to check out your work and sign up for classes at the Aperture Gallery, Aperture Academy?
Sure. Well, apertureacademy.com. That's where we do all of the education and the gallery. My images are on that website, but my images, especially the panoramic images online, if you want to zoom in and blow them up and see the detail, is at StephenOachs.com. That's Stephen with a PH. My last name is Oachs.
Perfect. Stephen, thanks again for taking time out of your busy gallery day to do this. And I guess the next time I see you, we'll be at the meetup that we're holding right here.
We sure will. We're going to have it right here in the Aperture Academy.
Very cool. Thanks, Steve.
You bet.